Hello and welcome. In today's video, we're continuing our updated emulator tier list for the first half of 2025. We've already covered the Nintendo 3DS and Nintendo Switch emulators in a separate video, mainly because of the large number of different forks. Now, in the second part, we're going to focus on all emulators for consoles that primarily run 3D games. Keep in mind, this list is based solely on the Windows operating system. If you want, I can make a separate one just for Android. Before we explain the evaluation criteria, let's clarify a few things. In general, we use standalone emulators, but a few multi-system options were kept in the list because they delivered above-average performance. So, no Retroarch cores, with the exception of the Nintendo 64, where standalone emulators still have many issues, mostly due to plugin dependencies that negatively affect compatibility. Since this list is aimed at beginner and intermediate users, ease of use is one of the most important criteria. Emulators that auto-configure controllers, select the best graphics API by themselves, or come with ideal presets are rated more highly. On the other hand, emulators that require the user to search for info or manually tweak settings just to get basic functionality will lose points. However, needing to install BIOS or firmware won't count against the emulator. That's considered a standard part of emulation. Long periods without updates will also affect the score negatively. As we go through each project, I'll explain the reasons behind their placement. I'll do my best to be fair, but remember, this is still a personal list. Even with objective criteria, there's always room for different opinions, and that's okay, as long as we stay respectful. Almost all gameplay footage shown in the background was recorded directly from the emulators themselves, except for ePSXe, which isn't really compatible with Windows 11. Now, let's break down the tier list rankings. Tier S, top tier emulators. They require little to no user input. Everything's configured automatically, from controls to graphics, or they're so mature in development that only minor fixes are needed. Tier A, excellent emulators. You might need to tweak a few things, but the overall experience is well above average. Tier B, solid emulators that do their job well, but may require more user interaction or still have noticeable limitations. Tier C, mediocre emulators. Performance may be lacking, or setup might be incomplete, but they still offer an acceptable experience. Tier D, emulators that fall short in nearly every aspect. So without further ado, go ahead and drop a like to help support the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. Now, here's a quick word from our sponsors, and then we'll jump right into the tier list. If you want to buy original games while saving a lot, check out Instant Gaming, the digital store that sells games for various platforms, such as PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. Get games of all genres with discounts of up to 95%. You'll also find a variety of gift cards and credits for other services. You can pay for your order through your credit card on a website with a 4.7 rating on Trustpilot. You're buying games directly from Instant Gaming, not from other retailers. If you encounter any issues, Instant Gaming offers 24/7 support. And this month, Instant Gaming is offering a great discount on the newly released Monster Hunter Wilds, with up to 51% off, ensuring the lowest historical price for the game. Check out the price comparison with Steam's pricing. What are you waiting for to save? Links in the description. Starting with the Sega Saturn, a system that, despite looking simple, has one of the most complex architectures, even by today's standards. The console used CDs, cartridges, and to make matters worse, had 2 GPUs. This whole mess made it very difficult to develop decent emulators for years. Only in the last 2 or 3 years has the scene started to evolve. In fact, we have a newcomer emulator on this list that's been revolutionizing the landscape. Starting with BizHawk, it offers a basic experience for the Sega Saturn. 2D games are usually quite pixelated, which some people even prefer, and 3D games suffer from common limitations of the era, not to mention the lack of shadow filters or deinterlacing effects. It gets updates every 3 to 6 months, which is acceptable for the platform, has good accuracy, and most importantly, it supports CHD game files. BizHawk opens our list in Tier B. It's a good emulator for what it aims to do. Next up is Kronos. Unlike BizHawk, Kronos provides upscaling tools that significantly improve the visuals of 3D games on modern screens, along with some visual customization filters. However, finding a compiled Windows build is difficult nowadays, and its SDL interface has issues. I had to force my DualShock 4 to be recognized as an X-input controller to get it working. It also gets updates every 3 to 6 months. Despite its better visuals, the control issues and lack of easy builds place it in Tier B as well. Yaba Sanshiro 2 is the emulator that's been receiving the most updates recently. Especially around the Sega Saturn's 30th anniversary, it got major visual improvements for those looking for better image quality on modern displays. In my opinion, it's the emulator with the best graphical output on this list, and it's the one I use the most. It's not perfect yet, but definitely one of the best options available, so it goes straight into Tier A. Mednafen, although it's a multi-system emulator, is being evaluated here only for its Saturn support. And the problems start right away. It requires a third-party front-end to be usable. It also shares the same SDL issues as Kronos, requiring external tools or adapters to work with X-input controllers. Another downside, it doesn't support CHD files, which are ideal for compact libraries. On the bright side, it offers the most filters for both 2D and 3D games. Its last update was almost a year ago. Overall, these downsides are a big turn-off for beginner users, and despite its visual quality, we're placing it in Tier C. It could reach Tier B or even A if we were judging only by graphics. Last but not least, we have Ymir, the newcomer that's shaking things up. When I first tested it, CHD support wasn't implemented, but that changed with the most recent update. It doesn't yet have filters for 2D or 3D games, but considering the rapid pace of development, it's only a matter of time. For its fast progress and already strong foundation, it earns a place in Tier A. Now let's move on to the PlayStation 1, which has many emulators available. But here, we'll focus only on the two main ones. Starting with ePSXe, one of the oldest and most well-known emulators, which made a lot of people happy in the past. But nowadays, it's completely outdated, no updates, no support for modern systems like Windows 11, and it still uses the old plugin system, which only makes things harder for users. For all of that, it goes straight to Tier D. Not because of what it was, but because of what it can no longer do. Next up is Duckstation, one of the most solid emulators on this list. It's basically in a maintenance stage now, as most features are already implemented. It offers automatic controller detection, optimized graphics settings by default, built-in fixes for many games, and a clean, modern interface. It's easy to use, stable, and complete, exactly what every gamer looks for. That's why it's the first emulator to go into Tier S. Next is the Nintendo 64, which, like the Sega Saturn, still faces persistent emulation issues due to its architecture. Because of that, all standalone projects were excluded here, and I used only the two Retroarch cores. Starting with Mupen 64 Plus, it's not bad, but some games have serious issues, like missing 2D cursors, which are essential for many titles. It does have minor graphic enhancements, like support for modern displays, but nothing revolutionary. It could have made Tier B, but the missing cursors are a deal breaker, so it goes into Tier C. The other core is Parallel 64. It also has a standalone version, but here I'm using it through Retroarch. Unlike Mupen 64 Plus, Parallel renders cursors and 2D elements properly, and it also features anti-aliasing and high internal resolution, which really improves the original look of Nintendo 64 games. If you have to pick one, Parallel definitely offers fewer issues and better results. We'll place it in Tier A. Moving on to the Dreamcast, we have two main options, Redream and Flycast. The first comes with a limited free version and a paid one, while the second also supports other systems, which we'll get to later. Let's start with Redream. As mentioned, the free version has some limits, like no enhanced internal resolution and fewer save states. However, in terms of emulation and performance, it's one of the best. Automatic configuration helps new users a lot, but honestly, I wish they adopted a more friendly monetization model, like PPSSPP, where you only pay if you want to support the project. Redream also gets updates at long intervals. For those reasons, even though it's great, it lands in Tier A. Flycast takes more setup, but offers way more. It supports not only Dreamcast, but also DeSmuME and other Sega arcade games, with excellent results. You can map controls by system, use the mouse for light gun games like House of the Dead, and it has tons of graphic improvements. A full-featured emulator that deserves its place in Tier S. Now for the best-selling console of all time, the PlayStation 2. We have two heavy hitters here, Play and PCSX2. Starting with Play, which is still in early access, and the final version may take a while. Even so, it's already solid, compatible with about 50% of the PS2 library, which is impressive for a new project. It still needs to improve things like noise filtering and deinterlacing, and it has some API issues. For its strengths and weaknesses, it lands in Tier B, though I believe it'll move up in future reviews. Now PCSX2 is a whole other story. If we were talking about older versions like 1.4, it wouldn't even rank that high. But after version 1.7, the emulator took off. And with version 2.0 and beyond, we've seen amazing new features like automatic API selection, auto controller setup, and a massive GameDB with the best settings for almost every game, even obscure ones. It's a perfect example of how a project can evolve over time, and that's why it goes straight into Tier S. Let's talk about the GameCube and Nintendo Wii, since both are emulated by the same project, Dolphin. Even if you're new to emulation, you've probably heard of Dolphin or its Android builds. This emulator inspired many others and is, without a doubt, a complete project. Officially, the devs say it's in maintenance mode because everything that needed to be done has already been done. But if you check the change logs, you'll still see quarterly updates, like HDR support, which transforms the look of the games. Dolphin is easy to set up, has amazing compatibility, and still offers impressive visuals to this day. And for all of that, it earns a spot at the very top in Tier S. After covering great projects for PlayStation 1 and 2, GameCube, and Wii, the story changes a bit when we talk about the original Xbox. Both Xemu and Cxbx-Reloaded have been progressing very slowly since 2022, the year I started following these projects. Starting with Cxbx-Reloaded, back in 2022, it was in active development. Every month brought interesting new features, and performance was already decent. It just needed better accuracy and compatibility to become a great emulator. But sadly, that didn't happen. Since then, the number of playable games has remained stuck, the same 166 titles from back then. While updates still happen, they don't bring meaningful improvements. So Cxbx-Reloaded joins ePSXe in Tier D. Now, Xemu is a love-hate story. I was once a tester for the project, but I was unfairly removed and insulted by a moderator, who, from what I've heard, isn't even part of the team anymore. I also received reports from other users who had similar negative experiences on the project's Discord server. But setting the drama aside, let's focus only on what matters, performance and innovation. For a long time, I thought Xemu had stalled, with no major improvements. At some point, it got save-state support, which was already a huge addition. And at the end of last year, came a turning point, the implementation of the Vulkan API, which fixed several issues in games like Forza Motorsport and Halo. However, it still struggles with serious upscaling problems. So even though it made progress, it's not enough to move it up too far. We'll leave Xemu in Tier B. Now moving on to the Nintendo DS, a handheld that continued the success of the 3DS. There are many emulators out there, but here we'll focus on the two main ones, DeSmuME and MelonDS. Starting with DeSmuME, it's a solid option, with great graphic filters and lots of customization settings. It performs really well in both 2D and 3D games, which is important, since the DS combines both styles. One of its few downsides is that the latest updates only appear on GitHub, which can discourage beginner users. That's why it goes into Tier B, but just to be clear, it's not bad at all, and it's fully functional for anyone looking to play with good quality. MelonDS, on the other hand, is another great option. In general, I'd even recommend it over DeSmuME, because it offers slightly better graphics and is easier to use. The issue is that the lead developer has been dealing with personal matters and has been away from the project. The last update came out last year, and that fact weighed on this decision. So, for that reason, it will also remain in Tier B, but it could go up in the future if development becomes active again. Now let's go to Sony's first handheld, the PSP. There are a few emulation options for this console, but none compared to PPSSPP. I've tested other projects, but honestly, none of them are worth it anymore. If you paid attention to what I said about PCSX2, Duckstation, and Dolphin, know that all of it applies to PPSSPP too. It's a solid emulator, currently in maintenance mode, with small updates, but even so, it always finds ways to improve. PPSSPP automatically selects the best graphics API for your device, sets up controls in a user-friendly way, requires minimal intervention, and still delivers excellent performance. So, it goes straight into Tier S. Now for the Xbox 360, we basically have two projects, which in practice function as one, Xenia Canary and Xenia Master. Canary is the main one, with more frequent updates, so it'll be the only one we analyze here. I own an Xbox 360, but whenever I can, I prefer playing my games on PC for convenience. Xenia already runs most of the games I like, and that's great. But there are serious issues for users with more modest hardware, especially weaker GPUs. Even with frequent updates, we haven't seen major improvements in compatibility or performance for quite a while. The lack of Vulkan support also weighs heavily, along with the need to use third-party interfaces to configure games and access other features. So, while it works, Xenia Canary still lacks several essential features. It'll stay in Tier C. Now onto the PlayStation 3. Just like the Xbox 360, there's only one really functional emulator, RPCS3. And if you've heard influencers saying this is the year of RPCS3, no, that's not exactly true. But that doesn't mean the project is stagnant either. Last week, I published a video detailing RPCS3's progress over the past 6 months. And the result is that the emulator gained around 10% to 15% in real performance. Which is great, but far from the hype some people created. What makes things difficult isn't the emulator itself, but rather the PlayStation 3's architecture, which has always been a nightmare for any developer. The infamous Cell processor was way too complex, even for its time, and that still affects the challenge of emulating the console perfectly today. With that said, RPCS3 sits somewhere between Tier A and B, but considering the real progress and current state, it deserves to be in Tier A. Now for the PlayStation Vita, we again have only one relevant emulator, Vita 3K. Even though it's still in its early stages, the emulator already runs a good portion of the console's library. The truth is, the PS Vita had a much stronger appeal in the Japanese market, so most of its games are geared toward that audience. For those of us in the West, we were left with a few ports of known titles, not many, and some modest exclusives. So even if Vita 3K works well with many games, the lack of relevant content and the slow development hurt the project. Because of that, Vita 3K will stay in Tier C. It still has a lot of potential but needs more attention and development. Now for the Wii U, we have a legendary emulator, CEMU. And there's no debate here, it's the best and only truly functional project for this console. CEMU is responsible for many innovations we now see in other emulators. It was one of the first to support the Vulkan API, boosting performance for both Nvidia and AMD users. It also pioneered solutions like asynchronous shader compilation and caching, now a standard in any good emulator. In terms of compatibility, it's hard to find a Wii U game that CEMU doesn't run, whether it's in WX, WUD, Loading format, or others. And even today, it's still the best way to play Zelda Breath of the Wild, with much better performance than the original console. Even with slower development lately, its legacy is already built. So CEMU goes straight to Tier S, no question about it. And to wrap up our list on a high note, let's talk about ShadPS4, which emulates PlayStation 4 games. It's not the only project attempting this, but honestly, the competitors are still in the testing phase with polygons and black screens. Meanwhile, ShadPS4 already runs about 10% of the PS4 library successfully. The last time I released a tier list, ShadPS4 was still in its early days, but it has evolved a lot since then. It's almost reaching version 1.0, currently at 0.9, with steady progress. There's still room for improvement, of course, but it's no longer just a beginner project. So today, it earns a spot in Tier B, with a good chance of moving up in the next video if development keeps this pace. Before we wrap up, don't forget to support this video with your like. This content took a lot of work to put together, 4 full days of dedication, so if you enjoy this kind of video, a like really helps the channel grow. All the emulators mentioned will be organized on our Patreon page, for free, no registration or account required, with official and safe links directly from the developers. If your tier list is different from mine, share it with us in the comments, your opinion matters too. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.